This is ACM ByteCast, a podcast series from the Association for Computing Machinery, the world's largest educational and scientific computing society. We talk to researchers, practitioners, and innovators who are at the intersection of computing research and practice. They share their experiences, the lessons they've learned, and their own visions for the future of computing. I am your host, Rashmi Mohan. There's probably not a day that goes by without using an AI-powered assistant for most of us. From editing our emails, to answering our queries, to making our reservations, this technology has wormed itself into our daily habits and is here to stay. And while we may not actively think about trust, risk, and compliance of the underlying data in our common use cases, when it comes to our money, we expect no less. Our next guest is embedded in the world of financial tech and spends most of her day finding ways to incorporate AI into these crucial workflows, driving efficiency and safety. Anusha Nerella leads FinTech automation at a global FinTech firm as a senior principal engineer. She has over 13 years of experience working on building scalable systems using AI ML in the domain of high-frequency trading systems and is particularly passionate about driving adoption of automation in the fintech industry. She serves on the Forbes Technology Council, the ACM Practitioners Board, is an IEEE senior member, and devotes significant time mentoring up-and-coming talent to lean in more on the use of AI technologies, building enterprise-grade software, and all things fintech. She's also often serves as a judge at hackathons in premier universities in the US. We are thrilled to have her with us. Anusha, welcome to ACM ByteCast.
Thank you so much for having me, Rashmi. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Let's begin. We have so many interesting things that I want to ask you, but I would love to lead with a simple question that I ask all my guests, Anusha. If you could please introduce yourself and talk about what you currently do, and also give us some insight into what brought you into this field of work.
Yeah, sure. So, thank you for the great intro. And my name is Anusha Nerella. I'm currently working as a senior software engineer at a leading fintech firm. So, where I actively work on building AI powered cloud native financial systems. Over the past 13 years, I have also contributed to modernization and innovation projects at various fintech firms like Barclays, Citibank. And prior to that, I have worked the US Patents and Trademarks Office. But my story didn't start in a big city or with access to the mentors. I grew up in a very rural background where computers were rare and there wasn't much guidance for someone who wanted to get into the technology. But what drew me in this was this fascination that with just code, I could make something work, like something that solved the problem, even if nobody around me could tell me how. I remember the trial and error, the late nights of figuring things out on my own, and the excitement when something finally ran successfully. That sense of discovery was addictive, and it kept me going when resources were limited. That experience, I would say, that shaped my career. It taught me resilience, creativity, and the confidence to keep learning. Today, whether I'm modernizing financial systems or applying AI to financial compliance, I carry that same mindset, that technology. I treat it as a tool anyone can use to build, to solve, and to empower. And I think that's what continues to inspire me, turning curiosity into real world impact, no matter where you start from. So I would always say, like, at the end of the day, I believe technology in finance should do two things: remove friction and build trust.
That's a great way to summarize, Anusha, and very inspiring to hear about your journey also. Was computer science a class that you had in high school? Was that your first sort of brush with coding?
That's actually, I wasn't a smooth entry through formal classes at first, actually. So I didn't have much exposure to computers until much later compared to many of my peers who are studying with me. But when I finally reached college, yes, I did take programming classes, but what really shaped me was self learning and experimentation. Probably many of the people can resonate with me about the same explanation. I often didn't have someone to guide me step by step. So I relied a lot on trying things out, making mistakes, debugging endlessly, and then feeling that sense of achievement when I finally got something to work. I still remember the first time I wrote a simple program that ran correctly. It might have looked tiny, but it gave me this feeling of, wow, I can actually build something from scratch. That's what pulled me deeper. Programming became less about syntax and more about empowerment during that time. If I can instruct a machine to solve a problem, then maybe I can scale that thinking to solve bigger and bigger challenges. Honestly, this mindset stayed with me even now. Whether I'm working on any financial system or platform or any AI driven compliance systems today, I still see coding as the same empowering tool, the key that opens doors to innovation, even if you start with much guidance.
That's incredible, Anusha. I mean, to think that you started in college and a lot of it is self driven. And you're right. I think we'll probably find a lot of our audience resonating with that, the sense of accomplishment that you talk about. When a program finally works, you're able to get it to do something much faster, more efficiently, at a larger scale than what you could have done if you had to do it manually. It's pretty incredible. So thank you for sharing that. I'm sure we'll tap into that in many, many situations as we talk about your career. One thing, I did a little bit of research on your work and the various projects you've worked on. One of the things that came across is that you're always very passionate about leaving a place in a better state than you found it. Has that been one of the guiding principles of the kind of work that you pick? And how did you get into the finance industry?
Just like anybody, it was through opportunity. So I just utilized the opportunity in a proper way. See, I would believe anyone have to wait until the opportunity hits the door. But once the opportunity hits our door, then we should not leave it and never giving up. So just never give up. I would believe the only guiding principle throughout my career, every system I touch, I want to leave it stronger, cleaner, and more future ready than when I first arrived. That's how I leave my footprint. So, in large financial infrastructures, you inherit decades of complexity. You never know until you get into it. So, for me, it's not enough to just make it work. Here, the goal is just to transform it so the next generation of engineers can build on a solid foundation. I like to say, good engineers solve today's problems, great engineers remove tomorrow's obstacles. So, as for how I entered finance, I was drawn to it because of the scale and the stakes. Finance is not just about numbers, it's about trust and access. Small improvements in processing speed, reliability, or risk detection, it ripples out to millions of people. That blend of high technical challenge and real world impact is what hooked me. And it's why I have stayed passionate about applying AI and engineering to the domain.
I love the quote that you shared. I think that's very, very powerful. I will want to talk about that a little bit more, especially around when you're building systems and you're building for, obviously we build with, the intent of commercial use, whether we're working for a company or we're working for a client, etc. It's always very challenging to kind of continue to deliver what a customer needs, and pairing that with building improvements within your own system, for a fact that when you actually invest the time and energy to improve your internal systems, you can be far more efficient in being able to deliver a solution to a customer. And yet, it's not very often that we're able to take that time to do things the right way rather than the fastest way. So, how do you kind of battle that decision?
So, definitely, I would be one of those persons who can take it as a challenging because, in order to become a leader, you have to have that faith in solving the situations with so much confidence. So, definitely, this kind of scenarios gives us critical tension, but this is the time we have to understand how much speed versus how much sustainability that we are applying here in finance, especially because I'm in finance. So the pressure to deliver fast is definitely immense. But if you only optimize for speed, you will definitely create a debt that someone will eventually have to pay. I have always approached it with a simple principle: build like the system that will outlive you. What that means in practice is finding balance. Yes, we meet the immediate business needs, but we also carve out space to strengthen the foundation through automation, I believe, reusable frameworks, and robust testing. It's a mindset shift. Investing in internal improvements is not a luxury, it's a multiplier. Every hour you spend making a system more reliable pays back tenfold when the next customer asks for a new feature. So I push for a culture where fast and right are not opposites. The fastest way in the long run is often doing it the right way upfront. That perspective helps both the business and the engineers. So this is what I would believe in this scenario.
That's very, very succinctly put and really shows the power of what you were talking about, which is investing in the framework is a multiplier. Have you found, especially as an engineer and a senior principal engineer, how does that influence work? Anusha, I'm curious because I mean, we'll obviously have a lot of engineers working. I mean, there are multiple, like we talk about, there are multiple forces that are influencing the decisions of what we build. Can you talk about like a few strategies that have worked for you in terms of being able to sort of guide the team in a certain direction, which may be at least temporarily at tension with product delivery?
See, definitely we have very proficient engineers and talented engineers in our team, and we would hire for that sake so that we could deliver a any highly scalable product with so much efficiency and quality. So that definitely is a great question for anybody who is working in any tech industry. Because at senior engineering level, you're not just writing code, you're shaping direction. So, and you are right. There are always competing forces like business deadlines, regulatory needs, customer expectations, and change of need. Because these days we are not even following waterfall anymore. So we have to go with the flow, like customer needs can change and they can come exactly before the release deadlines and they ask us to accommodate. So a few strategies have worked well for me for sure. So first, I would say data driven storytelling. When you can show how an upfront investment in a framework reduces incidents or accelerates delivery over time, it turns an abstract engineering choice into a business decision. And the later it follows is like incremental wins. Instead of proposing a 6-month factor, I break it into milestones that deliver visible value at each stage. That way, the business sees progress while the foundation gets stronger. And the later, principle based alignment. I anchor decisions in shared principles like reliability, security, and compliance. These are non negotiables in finance. So, framing engineering choices through that lens makes alignment easier. In short, I would say influence is not about saying, trust me, I'm an engineer. It's about showing the business that doing it right is not in conflict with delivery. It's the fastest path to sustainable delivery. The short term tension fades when everyone sees the long term multiplier.
I love it. I think the way you broke that down in terms of very specifically, like almost like a framework that anybody could use to kind of say, hey, if I wanted to go and influence a decision in terms of saying, this is something I feel very strongly about what we should invest in as a team, I think breaking it down into the dimensions that you talked about, it makes for a very, very powerful case. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Um, and I think it's not just you obviously talk about it in the financial space because that's where you are, but I think it is absolutely relevant in any industry because that's what happens as systems grow in volume and you're processing a lot more data. The product has lived on for longer. You tend to inherit and incur this tech debt, which you have to pay off in order for you to continue to be relevant and sustainable. So very valid points. But I'd love to talk a little bit more, Anusha, around financial systems itself, right? When you're building for the financial industry, I know a couple of times you mentioned trust, you mentioned compliance. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on what do those terms really mean from a software development standpoint? What are the factors that you keep top of your mind when you're building systems in the fintech industry?
So these terms definitely belong to domains, these are domain specific. So I would say for the software industry, mainly in finance, trust and compliance are not just buzzwords anymore, actually. If you see, there are engineering requirements baked into every decision. From a software standpoint, I think of them in three dimensions. Just to explain it more clear, first I would say like security by design. Every component is built assuming it will be attacked. So encryption access controls and audit trails are not add-ons, they are defaults. And second, resilience and reliability. If a system fails, it's not just downtime, it's financial risk. So we design with redundancy, observability, and graceful degradation. Trust means the system works when it matters most. And third, explainability and accountability, especially as we bring AI into the decision making. A credit decision, a fraud alert, or a risk score must be explainable to an auditor or a regulator and ultimately an end user. In finance, a black box is not acceptable. So, when I talk about trust and compliance, I mean building systems that are secure, resilient, and transparent. Because in financial technology, every line of code is not just serving a business, it's carrying someone's money, their data, and their confidence in the system. So, if you think you are also a customer, I'm also a customer. So, when we are believing in a financial firm, means we have to consider all these pointers. So, trust in finance is invisible until it's broken. And as engineers, our job is just to make sure it never breaks. That is what I believe.
That is very good context. I think it really helps us understand the emphasis and to your point about downtime is not just, hey, I can't use this platform, it's an inconvenience. Of course, everything comes with business loss and business risk, but there is an increased level of sensitivity, especially around financial risk. And that's something that you absolutely need to take very, very seriously. When you talk about ability, Anusha, are you primarily talking about sort of the underlying data being transparent and traceable? What is it that you do in order to enable that? How do you process your data, or what kind of guardrails do you put in place to ensure that you never miss the standard of both traceability and auditability, but also security?
Yeah, that's a great question because explainability goes beyond just showing the data. So, in financial systems, we always think about these three layers like data lineage, being able to trace exactly where the data is coming from, how it was transformed, and why it was included in a model's decision. That transparency is very critical. When regulators ask, show me the source, we should be able to clearly show that. And second, model interoperability. Sorry, can we cut here? I misspelled it.
Go for it, no problem. I'll take note of it.
So, second, modal interpretability. It is not just a score, but the why behind it, the question of why behind it. For example, instead of simple saying a credit card application is declined, an explainable model will highlight the key factors, saying like high utilization, no, less credit history, or recent delinquency. That helps customers understand, regulators validate, and teams improve. And third is about auditability and reproducibility. Every decision has to be replayable. Otherwise, we don't know whether that can be consistent across. If a transaction is flagged as fraud today, 6 months from now, I should be able to reproduce the exact condition inputs and model outputs that led to that decision. So, just to your point, explainability is both about the data being transparent and the decision making process being traceable, reproducible, and defensible. Like I said, in finance, a decision is not explainable until you can show the data, the model, and the reasoning, all in a way that a human can understand. This is how the agents are also being built with explainable AI.
Understood. That is very, very, very insightful, right? When you talk about data lineage and the need to plan for this data to live also for a significant period of time. I'm guessing financial institutions have very strong compliance needs for you to keep the data alive for a longer period of time. You were talking about, like, hey, 6 months later, I need to be able to replay this entire transaction and understand how I determined it to be fraudulent. So that is, I mean, I would say a couple of questions that come up from there in itself, right? Two different questions. One is around the data that you use to train these models, etc. How do you ensure that data is clean or in a format that you can easily use in terms of the map, the schema that you're trying to use? How do you clean the data, basically? That's one of my questions. And a follow up question is, especially as an engineer, I'm also curious about how do you test for these products, right? I mean, how do you generate synthetic data that is mimicking what you see in the production environment? How accurate can that be? How difficult is that of a problem?
Yeah, sure. So I would say data quality is everything because when we have bad data, it is more dangerous than having no data at all. So because if a model is trained on biased, inconsistent, or noisy data, the errors get amplified at scale. So, first, foremost thing, the schema standardization is very much important in order to make sure that every source system speaks a common language. In finance, data often comes from decades old platforms and new digital channels. So, mapping to a consistent schema upfront is very essential. And considering the second one is like more of data validation and enrichment. So we build automated pipelines that check for missing values, anomalies, and then enrich with external sources when it is needed. For example, reconciling transaction data with reference feeds ensures consistency. Imagine I'm a customer. I'm deciding right now, saying in New York, and I created an account. Later onwards, I moved to different state, and I have generated different credit history or different transactions during that region. So when it is the time to aggregate the customer data, it always has to consider both the regions, like whether it is zip code based or whatever it is. So it has to relate all the historical data and generate a report based with irrespective of where the customer has been moving. So that's how the data validation and enrichment should happen. And governance and feedback loops are the third. Cleaning is not a one time task for sure, I would say. I would definitely say this because I have faced this so much. We continuously have to monitor the drift and we have to log anomalies and refine data pipelines. In fraud detection, for instance, if an alert was a false positive, that feedback goes back into improving both the dataset and the model. So for me, clean data is not just about pre processing, it's about creating a life cycle where data remains trustworthy over the time. So every model is only as reliable as the data it was raised on. If models are the brain of financial AI, clean data is like oxygen. Without it, the system suffocates, I would say.
ACM ByteCast is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcast, Podbean, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you're enjoying this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite platform. I love these analogies that you bring out. They're so accurate in terms of explaining the situation. So thank you for sharing that. And I think 100% agree with you on data cleanliness being something that you're constantly working towards, right? This led me to another line of questioning, Anusha, which is given the, stringent sort of needs of the systems that you're working on, is it typical that you tend to build a lot of these observability tools, like for example if you're monitoring data and over a period of time, right, and for especially for customers who have data retention policies which are very long, are there commercial tools available that you can actually adopt for your software development, or do you tend to have to build a lot of custom tooling?
So it's based on how we are proceeding with our decisioning and what exactly was our problem. Because in finance, observability is just not a convenience, it's compliance. And you're right, retention policies can span over years, sometimes even decades. So monitoring data integrity over time is non negotiable. From what I have seen across this industry, it's usually a hybrid. Commercial observability tools like logging, monitoring, or any alerting platforms gives us a strong foundation for sure. They're reliable and scalable in order to help accelerate our adoption. But financial systems come with unique needs like multi-year replayability, strict audit trails, and regulatory reporting. So those needs often require custom extensions on top of the commercial stack. For example, while an off-the-shelf tool might tell you a system failed at 3 a.m. A custom layer ensures we can reconstruct the exact transaction flow, data lineage, and model decision that occurred in that moment, even years later. So the strategy here, leverage the commercial tools for the scale and efficiency, but build custom where compliance, explainability, and domain specific needs demand it. In finance, we believe observability is just not about knowing that something broke. It's about proving why, how, and what the impact was even long after the fact. Because I believe commercial tools tell you what happened, but custom tools prove why it mattered.
Yeah, that makes incredible sense. I think, again, using the power of a commercially built tool that is built to scale, but adding your custom implementation layers to kind of suit your use cases makes a lot of sense. Is
Yes.
that true of AI models as well, Anusha? Are you starting to see that both the customers that you work with, as well as for your own usage within the organization, that you are able to leverage some of the commercially available LLM models and then build on top of that? Or do you think that the way to go is to actually sort of build this out from scratch in a custom model?
So, like I said earlier as well, so absolutely, it is very similar to observability space. Even it is in in the context of large language models, like they definitely give us powerful foundation. But in finance, you can't just take them off the shelf and deploy them directly because the capability is very raw here, but the context, compliance, and precision have to be layered on. So the approach I have seen succeeded is hybrid adoption. Start with a commercially available model, then fine tune or constrain it with the domain specific data and guardrails. For example, you can use an LLM to analyze unstructured compliance documents. But before it reaches production, you add layers of prompt control, explainability, and domain trained data so that output aligns with financial regulations. And this applies for customers as well. They're open to leveraging these models, but only when they come with clear boundaries. Finance doesn't tolerate hallucinations. If a model generates the wrong legal interpretation or a false fraud signal, the cost is enormous. That's why custom wrappers, monitoring, and explainability layers are as important as the model itself. So, yes, we are leveraging the scale of commercial LLMs, but the real value is in how we adapt them. Think of the base model as the engine and our custom layers as the steering, brakes, and safety systems that make it roadworthy for finance. I'm trying to give these analogies so that this can be understandable for the people who are not into finance as well.
No, I greatly appreciate that. That's what I was saying. I think I love your analogies. They really bring the point home. So, to that point, especially because you're building all of this sort of these custom layers on top of, say, a commercially available LLM, and how critical it is to not have errors or basically have, I'm wondering if your lead time in terms of, experimenting with a model or a system within your development environment before it goes out to production or goes out to prime time, are those lead times significantly longer in the fintech industry as opposed to, say, other industries?
It's more of, I would say, when we are considering this kind of metric, right? So we have to make sure. I mean, I have to consider only the fintech here because I have been in the decade space of this part. So lead times in fintech are typically longer for sure. And I believe that's for a good reason. In many industries other than fintech, you can experiment fast and iterate as well because you don't have a regulatory or compliance fall into this picture. In finance, a failure is just not a bug. It can be a compliance violation, a financial loss, and a regulatory breach. So it can be any of these. So we cannot just treat it as a bug. So what we do is building layers of safety into experimentation. Prototypes may move quickly in a sandbox, but before anything reaches production, it goes through rigorous testing, validation against historical data sets, stress tests under extreme conditions, and explainability reviews to ensure we can just verify every decision the system makes. This does not extend the timeline compared to, say, any consumer tech, but it's a conscious trade off. In finance, speed without trust is meaningless. A delayed rollout is far less costly than a premature one that erodes confidence. So, yes, experimentation is slower, but it's also deeper. And I have found that this actually pays off in the long run because once a system is validated, it can scale globally with much more confidence.
That makes a lot of sense. And like, I think, as you've emphasized multiple times, I think the trust of your customer in your system is absolutely paramount to your business. And so I don't think, as opposed to, say, maybe a consumer internet product, customers, I mean, I would say even me as a fintech consumer, is not looking for the latest and greatest in terms of features, but 100% is looking for security, the ability to trust the system, to make sure that it is always accurate, is always secure. So I think 100% agree with you that the dimensions by which you're measured in terms of your consumer confidence as well as satisfaction is probably leans and weighs much more heavily on these dimensions.
Hmm. Yes, I agree with that.
Got it. The other question, I mean, which of course is what everybody is talking about, is within the fintech industry itself, Anusha, what role is agentic AI playing? Where are you seeing the applications? What do you see as things that will really sort of catapult the user experience? And what are the things that you're seeing as risks?
So now it's not in any evolving phase, I would say. It's already ready to deployable phase. Many applications, many organizations are in that condition right now. So it is starting to shift finances. Now everybody is proactive. So traditionally, our systems used to wait for instructions. And when a customer applies for a card, a trader submits an order, or a complaints officer runs a report. Any of this used to happen with using traditional systems. Now, the system cannot wait for instructions for these kind of activities. With agentic AI, the system can anticipate needs, act on behalf of the user, and adapt dynamically. Right now, we are seeing applications in personalized financial guidance, like AI agents that can help users manage spending, optimize investments, or detecting unusual account activity without even waiting for the customer to ask. So, that can be a specific training for that agent to perform according to that customer wish. On the institutional side, agentic AI is emerging in workflow automation, like agents that can reconcile transactions across multiple systems, flag anomalies, and even generate complaints documentation automatically. But considering your later question, the real carrot for user experience will come from contextual awareness. An AI that doesn't just give you the raw insights, but takes the next logical step. I can give you a better example here. Instead of just telling a portfolio manager, risk is rising in this sector, the agent could propose rebalancing the strategies and even simulate outcomes will give better output. That said, the promise comes with responsibility here because when we are dealing with agentic AI, the systems must design with strict guardrails. Like human oversight, auditability, and transparency are the factors that we need to consider in this case. Because in finance, autonomy without accountability is unacceptable. So I see agentic AI as the co pilot of the future, invisible when things are routine, but invaluable when decisions are complex, you know? So I believe that future of AI is just not AI answering just our questions, or it's AI asking the right ones on our behalf and at the right time. So
Yeah, I really enjoyed that answer, Anusha, especially the point that you made about oftentimes when we think about agentic AI, where, hey, here's this system that is going to come, one with obviously with recommendations on like, hey, I know what your patterns of behavior are. Here are the few things that I can do for you without you asking me to, so I can be more efficient. But I love the fact that you also said simulating transactions, right? Especially again in this sensitive financial industry, you want to be very careful about the kind of controls you're giving to an agent to execute on your behalf. And so I think the simulation gives a lot of information and a lot of insight to a customer. And even for me, for example, if I'm making a financial transaction, I would love to see, hey, play this out for me, see how this will, I mean, what do you predict will happen if I made this move? And then have the human make the final decision. Do you see that changing at all, Anusha? Or do you think that's kind of the pattern that we'll be following for the foreseeable future?
yeah, definitely. I would say we would definitely simulate such kind of powerful middle ground because it gives the system agency to explore outcomes. Even though we are keeping our final decision to human, but in finance, the balance is critical because customers and institutions both want empowerment without losing control. Right now, we are in a phase with agentic AI, primarily like it simulates, recommends, and assesses. It helps you see multiple futures before you commit to one. But over time, I see that evolving into a tiered trust model. For low risk actions like automating routine reconciliations or generating a complaints draft, the agent might act autonomously. But for high stake actions like reallocating millions in assets, the agent will always remain in a co pilot role, offering scenarios and insights, but requiring explicit human sign off. What I don't see changing and what must not change is the principle of human accountability. Financial AI should always expand decision making capacity, but it should not be replaced. Simulation will remain the anchor. It provides transparency, foresight, and confidence without stripping away human judgment. So, to me, the real power of agentic AI is just not about making decisions for us, it's making us better decision makers. So, this every single time, even I was invited for a guest keynoting or any relatable conversations as well, I would always say it's a collaborative effort. Even though we get agentic AI or agents, or people say AI replaces human capacities. No, because we are the brain. So treat it as a collaboration effort. Do not even think towards the dimension that something will replace human brain. If we are not there, do you even think there is a foundation of AI? No, not even a chance.
That's a very powerful statement and a message. I love the fact that you bring up human accountability being the final sort of frontier in any of these decisions. One thing I did want to talk about is also this is such an evolving space, Anusha. So much is changing all the time. You certainly sound like the kind of person, who loves to experiment and be hands on. You're involved in a whole bunch of hackathons. So I think you're always sort of trying to keep yourself on that cutting edge of, hey, what's new, what's evolving in this space. What would you say are your key strategies for staying abreast of this ridiculously fast moving technology space?
So there are various mediums I would say one has to explore in order to scale up ourselves, whether it is in knowledge sake or the strategy sake. The space is moving at an almost dizzying pace. For me, staying current is not any kind of passive mode. It's always intentional, I would believe. I use three principles in my perspective. I do not leave hands on experimentation for sure. I don't just read about new tools, I try to test them. And coming to hackathons part, they are like side projects. And even small prototypes at work give me a safe way to explore what's hype and what's real. Because that's the community where the students will come up with fresh ideas and fresh way of implementations. And something are like very startup ready as well. We will be mesmerized with their thought process, and sometimes they might lack the understanding between the reality and the real industry standards and all. So that's where the professionals come into picture to guide them in a proper way. So I would love the interaction during hackathons. And second, community engagement, I would say. I stay active in professional circles like IEEE, ACM, and industry conferences. It's not just about listening to talks, but about exchanging ideas with peers who are wrestling with the same problems. That network is often where I hear the earliest signals of change. So I would say it has to be a continuous synthesis. We make a habit of write, speak, and teach. Whether it's an article, a keynote, or mentoring, just make sure always distill the new concepts into something I can explain forces me to really internalize them. So the only strategy I believe, and throughout the my conversation or my talk, I must be emphasizing this in different examples as well. Always experiment, connect, and distill. Because in a field evolving this fast, the only way to stay relevant is to stay curious. And definitely, I would say I don't chase trends, but I chase understanding. That's what keeps me future proof. At least if I understand, I would make it relative. to understand something new.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think you make an incredibly valid point. We do hear a lot about experimentation, especially as engineers. Often we want to kind of build something and try it out. I love the point that you bring up about, write, speak, teach as well, because I think the ability to explain a concept to someone else really strengthens your own understanding of it or forces you to, which I think is an incredibly valuable insight.
Mhm.
For our final bite, Anusha, I want to talk about a couple of things. One is I know you're very actively involved in mentoring the next generation of leaders, of engineers, of thinkers in this space. What pushes you towards that? And what do you think works well? Why do you seek that out?
See, I came from the similar phase, I would say, where I needed guidance, proper dimension to go through. So, mentorship is deeply personal for me. As I clearly explained about my background, I wouldn't be here where I am today without people who believed in me, challenged me, and opened doors when I'm still figuring things out. So, I see mentorship as both a responsibility and a privilege. It's how we pay forward the opportunities that we were given once. What pushes me is the belief that talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. By mentoring, I can help bridge that gap. Sometimes it's technical, walking someone through how to architect a system, but often it's about confidence or perspective to see a bigger future for themselves than what they have imagined. But what works best in my case is authenticity and accessibility. Being honest about your own struggles makes your guidance more relatable. And creating spaces like hackathons, talks, office hours, where younger engineers feel safe to ask simple questions. This fosters the growth far faster than formal lectures. At the end of the day, mentorship is just not about teaching, it's about building leaders who will, in turn, mentor others. That's how you create a cycle of innovation that outlasts anyone's career. I believe the true measure of leadership is just not what you build, it's who you inspire to build after you. I came from this cycle. I wanted to continue to build this cycle.
That's absolutely fantastic. And it's a great note for us to kind of tie it all together, Anusha. I think paying it forward is absolutely the right way to think about this, especially because we all are the products of the influences and the mentorship and the guidance and the help that we've received through our career. I want you to thank you so much for the time that you have spent with us. It's been absolutely fascinating and insightful to delve into the world of fintech with you, Anusha. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us at ACM ByteCast.
Thank you so much, Rashmi, for having me here. It's true pleasure to share my journey and perspectives. For me, the heart of these conversations come back to one such simple belief. Technology in finance or any industry should do two things. Like I said, remove friction and build trust. But I have been fortunate to work on systems that carry real impact. So, thank you again for having me. It's been an honor.
Likewise.
ACM ByteCast is a production of the Association for Computing Machinery's Practitioners Board. To learn more about ACM and its activities, visit acm.org. For more information about this and other episodes, please visit our website at learning.acm.org/bytecast. That's learning.acm.org/bytecast.